entry garden that we've just started as you come into Independence, and one at the library. They support ag and forestry as well as health and wellness initiatives. The seed library, we held 2 workshops last year and donated over 300 packets of seeds. Even though I didn't highlight it in page 3, they also support education and health and wellness initiatives. Grayson Land Care hosted 10 meetings and celebrated 15 years of service to the community. We provide education, public service, and tourism initiatives. In addition, 148 volunteers from Grayson Land Care donated over 4,780 hours in 2022. The Independent Sector Resource is a group that assigns dollar values to volunteer hours. Currently, that's valued at almost $30 an hour. If you do the math, that comes up to a staggering $143,161. So the money that you do give Grayson Land Care is multiplied throughout our community. For 2023, the $5,000 we're requesting, 2,000 of that would go to food independence to meet the increased demand we're expecting. 1,000 would go to the permaculture garden. They're planning on hosting several community workshops this year. Permaculture is one of the new initiatives that greatly support trying to sequester carbon and help with global warming and improve the soil. All of those things, Virginia Tech is doing a new soil initiative this year, so they will help support that. $1,000 would go to the school garden to add additional outdoor growing beds, as well as to be able to actually buy tools and gloves that will fit the little kids' hands. We'd like $500 to support the Clean River Initiative, and we're also planning a new litter cleanup campaign. $350 would go to the Independence Farmers Market. We're excited to be hosting cooking demonstrations again this year. We have some advertising campaigns worked out with the tourism department, and we're also finally transitioning our online market platform to a new one that will allow much better mobile access and hopefully increase our sales there. $150 would go to the free market for the purchase of the scale so they can weigh stuff coming in, and also to purchase some new items that they've been donating to various community partners to help folks in need. So that is our request. Thank you very much for this time, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Doesn't the free market partner with social services on
They do.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
So that is the community partners I was alluding to. What we do is there is a part of the free market that is closed off from the general public. That's where any of the newer items that come in that are in very good condition, including sheets and pillows and housewares, most of that is the new items that Kathy has purchased, some with the CARES grant funding, and also through other donations. So there's new items that are there, and also the highest quality items that are either donated or are now coming through Walmart. When we have kids who are just aging out of foster care, if we've got a family who has lost a home in a fire, or if we just have folks who are linked up with social services who are in need, they can send clients to the free market and they're able to pick out whatever items they can use. We're also working with the women's shelter, and Kathy would be better able to tell you exactly who else is benefiting from that. But that's become a big outreach for the free market. The other thing they do is they have a medical lending library. And so for a lot of folks who may not have enough money to purchase, a wheelchair or a walker that they're only going to use for a limited amount of time, those are also available either for folks to keep or to check out from the free market.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I just So the other day, you guys were on the agenda as the farmer's market. Is that gonna be a separate ask
No,
for?
and it should have been as Grayson Lane Care, because the farmer's market is one of our programs under Grayson Lane Care.
Okay. And so you guys have quite a few things under your umbrella so the 501 is
Yes.
basically the lane care, and then these other organizations, so they all operate under that 501c?
Yeah.
Correct.
One of the things we're able to do, as smaller organizations try and form, they either decide they're gonna stay with Grayson Lane Care or they can split off. Food Independence may at some point decide to do that. One of the very smaller projects that we've also offered that 501c3 status to is the Tractor Garden and the Mural Project. They basically needed a bank account and they also needed 501c3 status so they could take more donations. And so Grayson Lane Care was able to extend that umbrella to them as well.
Okay. And so the project in town, the farmers feeding framers, was that under the farmers market umbrella here? Was
Yes.
that part of that?
Mhm.
Okay, good. And I guess you probably know, I've been down to the town office and asked for some of the information that they had. And one thing that just is troubling to me and jumps out is the $1,480 beverage service to Creek Bottom Brewery.
That I know absolutely nothing about. What the farmer's market did is it presented a fixed price contract to the town that was based on the government rate of per diem. We looked at that we would be feeding 3 meals a day to 60 timber framers plus staff, so we were feeding about 70 people. And that $33,000 was the fixed price we offered the town. We provided the meals at the Gate Center. We purchased some hard goods that were necessary to do that cooking, and that was basically all we provided. The town, we bought the food that was served. The beverage service, I know absolutely nothing about.
Okay, but was there an agreement with the town that anything you guys had left over, you guys got to keep
Yes.
in your, and do you have that figure? No, because it seems like that could have potentially been quite a bit. And the reason I've gotten several calls on this too, and my constituents are in the town as well as the county. So do you know?
So there is still an outstanding, very large bronze plaque that will go on the building, listing everybody who volunteered. That was over 110 people. The 60 timber framers who came were all volunteer, and we had over 50 people who also volunteered their time. The only people who were paid were the chefs who did the actual cooking. That was about $5,000. And of the unclaimed funds, that some will go to the plaque, which we estimate will be in somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000, depending on how big the thing is. And we had 10,000 total left over.
So the volunteers you mentioned that provided the labor, but the instructors were paid that oversaw.
So that was the timber framers, and we had no part of that. So the people we paid were the 4 chefs who worked. Goodness, Jen Cavey actually started planning for that about 4 months in advance and worked, she worked more than 10 hours every day we were there. And then we had 3 other chefs who also put in considerable amount of time.
And there's $2,043 for hats. Do you know what that document I got from the town?
I have no idea.
With the hats.
So it sounds like some of the dollar amounts you're looking at are the contract with the timber framers, which I have absolutely no knowledge or access to. The only thing the farmer's market was involved with was the farmers feeding framers contract with the town.
Right. And I know there's maybe a lot of this that you're not familiar with, but overall, it just seems like that there was a lot of leeway given and appears to be some abuse and major miscalculations in this.
All I will say
Project.
is, Mr. Walters signed those contracts, I'm assuming with oversight from the town council. We based our particular part of the farmers feeding framers, as I said, on the per diem. We honestly had no idea how much that would cost or what it would take. Again, the town had the option of trying to negotiate price or negotiate any of those terms. It was signed without any question. And as I said, that was strictly with Mr. Walters, and I'm assuming with town council approval.
Well, I appreciate you being forthright on that. I just think it's a good lesson that we can learn as a board and administration, because when the rubber meets the road, it's gonna fall back to the town manager and the town council signed off on it. We just, they gave us, this permission to do X, Y, and Z. That's kind of the argument I'm hearing now about why some of this went the wrong direction. So I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be here at the right
Can
time.
I ask one thing?
Yes, sir.
I noticed in the cooking expressions, and that brought my attention to, the Gate Center and Commercial Kitchen. How do you all value that? Are your vendors able to use that? And do they, and what can we work together to increase that?
So one thing that is very unique to Virginia and is not the case in our neighbor in North Carolina is Virginia has very broad cottage industry laws. And so where our vendors can do a wide range of products out of an uninspected home kitchen, that reduces the need that for a North Carolina vendor to do any baked good or canned good, which are exempted in Virginia under our exemptions, they have to have a inspected kitchen. Our folks do not. So the impetus for my vendors to utilize the Gate Center is less than it would be if Virginia was not quite as lenient in those exemptions. What Rebecca and I have been talking about, and I need to check the timing on it, the local food promotion grants and the farmers market promotion grants are out right now. What the local food promotion grant would do is if we could come up with a way to, because our vendors aren't really seeing as much of a need, if we can give them incentive to try that kitchen and through grant funding, maybe give them the first month or 2 months free of charge so they can actually utilize that facility, see the benefits of the facility, and possibly get some more of the paperwork help and everything else that goes into creating a value-added product that would be available for wholesale sales and retail sales that are not direct to the consumer. So if any of our guys got big enough to where they were hoping to mass produce, like I looked into my pepper jelly. If I had incentive to use the commercial kitchen to try that out and follow through with all of that, that would be an incentive. So that's one thing Rebecca and I are looking at.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
See ya.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.
See ya.
Okay. Next, budget work session was, goals and objectives. Rich, are you taking that or?
Can we start? I think I'm starting. Watch out now. Hey, look, thanks for being here, obviously. Goals and objectives, I think are always important. We will never lack for activity. Priority is always the key to everything that we're doing here. And so we want to make sure we set good priorities. I come from a planning background, some of my planning background, and there's kind of 4 phases in that for me. 1 is understand the situation. 2, determine goals and objectives. 3, plan, prep, review, and approve. And then 4, plan, execute, and maintenance of it. So there's different parts of that. Today, what I understand is so far is our goals, it's our communication, which encompasses a few things, childcare and housing. Now, if we want to have a discussion on if those goals are still the priorities for this county, or if we want to add to those goals, I think maybe that's a proper discussion to have. And we also have, Lisa kind of did a draft goals and objectives, which we put out here and I want to present to you. We also have some examples of what we did in the past and what other counties can do, or other counties have done. And I'm kind of a visual person where I like to see kind of flow charts where I want to see it kind of laid out. We can all talk about it that way, but it's not up to me. We want to get you the information in a way that you can consume it the easiest. So that's what we're talking about here today. And that's kind of setting the stage for what we're doing. We're going to add to this.
I think
Can you restate those 3 goals, please?
Yeah, so the goals that I am aware of at this point in day 2 are communications, provide child care for the community, and housing, affordable housing for the community. Are those still?
I think on the communications piece, there's communication infrastructure specifically, but there's components of that as we talk about 911 and other things that aren't necessarily, electronics aren't necessarily considered infrastructure, but how that fits all together is what we're interested in. I think in the last time we talked about it was kind of how I left it.
Okay.
As far as those 3 goals, they're quite a bit different than our goals were last year. And so I'm not sure, where's the origin of these goals coming from? Is that from finance?
No, this
We determined, when did we determine communication with our housing?
When we had the ARPA funding discussion, we were talking about the money associated with that, and then we came up with kind of a focus.
So, I understand that was for ARPA, what we were gonna do with ARPA, money, what our overall county budget is for.
Well, it still flows into it because the ARPA money flows into our budget, so right now, those are what we determine to be priorities. But that's what we're here.
Right, exactly, Mr. Grant, that is why we're here, to make sure that, those goals and objectives still align what administration and the board of supervisors to make sure that we are on the same page, and that is why we're having this.
Okay. Good, I guess we need to include public safety, EMS, and the way that these were presented, I guess, were 1, 2, and 3, they're just 3. Okay.
Kind of the EMS and, public safety kind of being encompassed in the emergency communications, because that's a big issue with in this county's communication with our rescue squads.
So EMS and then 1A under that would be communications, I guess, 911.
No, communications is broader than just EMS. It's broadband, it's cellular, it's the 911 system, it's the paging system, all of which support across the board, first responders, economic development, medical, you name it. And so that's why it's a broader, the communication infrastructure category is a lot broader than just EMS in how I view it.
they may have changed, but I do remember the board making that the number one. And then I remember in the meeting, Lisa, this Gayar bringing out that, about the child care in Grayson County, and I think I remember a board member saying, well, I think you convinced this is our number 2 objective. And then housing seemed to be our 3. Now, it may have changed, but at that point, that was the order that we understood in administration.
Well, and at the time, the discussion was about, okay, what are we gonna do with this 3.2 million or whatever? I mean, that, because it was a gift that we had and we had to do something and think about it over a 3-year period. And so those are the things that I think all of us kind of agreed to, that we're definitely in need for the county, communications and childcare being the top 2, as they were both related to economic development and needs. It all flows in. And so, there's other things that we have, priorities that may be under the CIP or some other component within that, but it all flows into, and we've got 3, it's a gift. It's probably a once in a lifetime gift that we're gonna get this amount of money to do, to try to fix some things. And so that was kind of how it was, at least my recollection, how it was couched.
Sure.
So what's remaining in that gift? What's left? Have we spent any or?
We have spent some, the capital improvements, that we have spent out on public safety, police cars have been purchased. Wasn't prepared to answer that question, so I'm going off my hip here.
Okay.
Garbage truck.
Garbage trucks on its way. Actually, I think we got a couple of our garbage trucks that got found some really good deals there.
Well, rather than.
It's mostly equipment type purchases as of right now, as far as investing in capital, in
What's a rapid response
Instructions
vehicle
or-
for the
that
county?
is on board, yes. Now, supply chain is killing everybody. So we've not spent as much, like there's not as many checks have been written as I wanted to see by this fiscal year. It may be that we have to encumber those and they not be spent by the deadline, as long as they're encumbered.
Is it acceptable, since we don't have that exact answer right now, for her to go back, keep a little research into that and give you an answer?
Well, I don't necessarily need the whole breakdown. I was just curious as what's left of the 3.2 million. That was
Probably have
about 2.
about two, maybe a little less.
Because I know when we had that emergency meeting, it seemed like there was a sense of urgency that we had this special call meeting we had ARPA money, and then we came in, you guys were talking about childcare. And there was another staff member here from a different department, and I think you guys have been chatting about the childcare. So that's why I was just curious as to how much was left. What's the sense of urgency as far as deadlines of spending that?
That is, it has to be at least encumbered by the end of 24, by the calendar year of the end of 24, but spent by the end of 26.
Okay.
My memory of that is that we thought we had encumbered about 1.2 million,
That is correct.
which left us about 1.2 million, which we then further broke down as $1 million towards communication infrastructure and $200K towards childcare.
Yes.
So that's that fills that 3.3 or 3.4, 3 point whatever it was.
Thanks for helping me out.
Same number.
Well, your math didn't work out.
No, the number is, the number we talked about was 1.2. What I'm still foggy on is what the total amount of the ARPA was, 3.4 or 3 point something.
It was 3.4.
3
You said there was 1.2 left over. 1.2's been encumbered,
1.2 been encumbered.
but then you said 1.2 left.
Did we get 3 point?
Yeah, it's 3 point.
All right, then, yeah, I'm missing.
So
Okay.
it's around $2 million.
Yeah, it's about
Okay, yeah, my bad, thanks for that.
about 2. Good question. So our question to you, you thought,
Oh, sorry. Here's the examples that, slide right here. Ooh. Basically came up with, here's an old 18 budget that we had. That's kind of the way it played out. There's other options in there. There's a flow chart in there. We kind of want a little bit of guidance on what you would like to see us produce. We gave you some of the goals, top goals, and then we can kind of shape that once you decide, this is kind of what we'd like to see from a planning body. Yeah.
So in your approach, I mean, this is a lot to digest here.
It's really just formatting. So I'm sorry, apologize.
And so what would be most helpful to you?
Yeah.
Is it to focus on kind of bullet comments for goals and objectives, and then we let you take it back to the sausage machine? So,
Once you lay out for us kind of the high level points that you're comfortable with, then we'll put it back into the machine and go, okay, here's how we see it from a visual perspective. Are you okay with that? And then you can make changes at that point.
yeah, I think the presentation is important because it's internal and external audiences. This is going to go as well as stakeholders. So I think I'll probably be comfortable with whatever you come up with.
Okay.
But this format seemed to work in the past if it's used.
Okay.
Are we ready to move to the goals and objectives? Is that?
Yes.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, under the communications piece, there's kind of always three components to it. There's the broadband piece, and broadband is defined by speed, not by technology. There's the 911 communication piece, which, that we've got, a big purchase potentially out there for that. But then there's the cellular piece, and the cellular piece, mobile communications is really what that's about. But along with that comes the paging capability for our first responders, as well as potentially 5G data communications, which could be helpful in solving the broadband access, universal access goal. So underneath of those, the question becomes, we've got a big number out there for the 911 specific communications piece. What I don't see necessarily talked a lot about is the infrastructure associated with being able to hang that equipment. So for example, Point Lookout Tower, we have a tower, but that tower, depending on who you talk to, is either condemned or gonna be condemned, or it's brand new. It just depends on who you talk to. But there's some issues apparently with that. But there's also, as we move to the western end of the county, which is the area that is the most difficult to communicate in, there's gonna have to be additional infrastructure to be able to put this equipment on and facilitate whether it's cellular, broadband, or 911. And so underneath that, I think, is where within that, as you begin to understand that topic, the components where we probably need to think about investing is on the infrastructure side, so that we can enable these technologies as they get fielded, whether they're fielded by Gigabeam or USA or Verizon or Starlink or whomever, or the 911 commission.
Specifically, are you determining purchasing land, renting land, tower building?
Well, all that is based on the number of towers that are determined that are needed, right? So there may be lease agreements, there may be somebody's just happy to get free internet if they get a tower. The incentives to be able to get the location, but what is got to be determined is what is the actual need. So for example, with the 911 stuff, I don't know how far the signal is going to be shot, if it's microwave, if it's some other technology, AM band, I don't know that. But that distance to be able to effectively communicate from point to point is going to be driven, that's going to drive the number of towers we're going to need. 5G technology doesn't travel as far as 4G or LTE. And so there may be a requirement for more towers to do that, but we don't have that expertise. Somebody that's in that business is going to have to tell us that. So for this piece, which I don't have a number, I don't have a dollar number or even a physical number to kind of throw out there, but it's when Rebels talks to you about communication infrastructure and what we're trying to do on those 3 lines of operation. That, I think, is a critical piece as we're looking at, because their funding is out there for infrastructure. And we know we need towers. We just don't know yet, because we haven't done a lot of work yet. There's an RFP in the process, but we haven't done a lot of work yet on the cellular side to figure out that piece of it, because it's been mostly focused on the fiber and the fixed base wireless. Does that help?
It does, yes, that's exactly what we're wanting to hear from you guys, so that we can put our heads together and fine tune our goals and objectives, absolutely. And that's just one piece. I know communication is not new to our discussions here, but is there something new? Is there something that we've not discussed?
Mr. Chair, if I can say something, I don't want to get confused. I think communication, we're talking about budget priorities. And to solve the communication problem as a whole, our budget can't handle it.
Correct.
Our budget just can't, we can't fix the communication. So as we talk about, we're gonna have to break this down a little bit when we talk about saying communication as a whole is a priority. I believe it is, and I believe we need to be working on it as much and as often as we can. But when it comes to what we're gonna spend the money on, we can't spread it out over all 3, because then there's not enough to do anything. I get that's where I'm, because the cell towers, we won't have a clue until we set out an RFP and one of the providers comes in and says, if you want complete total coverage, you've got to have 9 towers at $1 million each. And to me, that's when we go back to body and say, allow us to rescope it. This is what it looks like. We need $18 million. But for our budget, the 2.2 that's left out of ARPA money is just a part of the overall $25 million budget. So I guess I want to keep it in my mind that what we can do with our budget won't be able to fix all of our needs. So how do we drill down into?
Can I follow that line of thought?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the one tower that we know, pretty well know, that needs to be addressed as soon as possible is Point Lookout. So from an immediate budget, next 12 months, that needs to somehow get figured out. What it's gonna cost, how we're gonna do it. There are some issues up on top of that mountain with landowners in that particular tower, so that's gotta be figured out. But I'm in agreement with you. The 911 system is 3.2 or something like that, our piece of that's gotta be probably phased over time, to figure out how to pay for it. So, but anyway, specific to your point, that tower on Point Lookout, I think is from an infrastructure standpoint related to communications.
Sorry. But what you're saying, I completely agree with, but knowing that that's a piece of that goal and a piece of the, that we need to accomplish within the next year or 2 years, that also gives us an idea of how much we need to gear toward investing and saving toward that project.
Just we'd be picking a number out of thin air.
Oh, absolutely.
And we don't have enough information, even though it is a priority of the counties to get communication. You can't set back enough to plan for the unknown. We were told $750,000 to $1 million per tower, and we just don't know what it looks like yet, because they're going to have to come and tell us what they need from the county through grants, but there will absolutely have to be some county money dedicated to solving communications all over the county, but we can't fix it all, and without knowing the number, that's where
I think we kind of know what the 911 system looks like as far as improving the radio communication system for first responders and law enforcement, in that, they did the study from federal. So we kind of know what they've looked at the towers and as far as infrastructure, what equipment needs to be placed there, what needs to be done. And we kind of have earmarked there for how much that's gonna cost. It's a matter of getting the,
Well, let me ask this question. What, it was my understanding that we have certain amounts set aside for the broadband project in our budget. So what is that figure? What is that?
We're putting currently
Each year, we're taking, I guess, a portion of the levy.
2 pennies of the levy, yes, sir.
Okay. And help me out with what a penny's worth.
Now it's worth $195,000 at the current tax rate. Used to be $160,000. Now
Per
it's
penny?
Mhm.
Okay. And when did so do we know the balance that because this thing started what, 2018?
Not quite that long ago, it's only been about 3 years ago.
Okay.
It's when we did the levy adjustment.
So we've had about 600,000, but we have spent out of that with, some expenditures. I don't have that right in front of me.
Okay. Because would that not fall a little bit in line with what you're saying, so we know according to this budget, what we can put if we dedicated 2 cents of the levy toward the broadband project, then we know what 2 cents is gonna be worth in the next budget or the budget that we're working on. That would definitely be a piece of what we would use along with body and, which we can't factor that into.
Yeah, and I guess where I am talking about money, and I think this is just way too early in the season to be talking about specific dollars, and just what are our priorities, and then we'll rank how much money goes, and get into the specific questions, I guess is.
But definitely, we've established that communications is a priority.
Short term, I mean, even before I took office, the radio communications in the west end of the county are totally prohibitive of volunteers being able to respond to calls. And I know we've been talking about it for a year. We haven't done anything to help the volunteer rescue squads in the west end of the county. I shouldn't say it like this. They're still struggling with their communications in the west end of the county. And
We've done a few things, but they're
it
band-aids.
hasn't addressed the whole situation.
Yeah, they're band-aids.
But if we're gonna do an overall communications over the next 2 years, it's probably not worth sinking a bunch of money into to fix it, but they need a short-term solution.
Is that short-term solution additional band-aids? I know that you're asking, if we're within sight of the large project to fix the whole thing, how much is it worth
Well,
investing some band-aids?
We need those options, and we've asked the emergency services coordinator a couple of times for what short-term capabilities that might be out there that we can do. It very well may be spending money that is a Band-Aid that could have been spent better, but if the call goes today, we've got a liability issue as well as a response issue related to communications in the western end for folks that can't receive the pages or can't communicate back to the dispatch. That's really what it's about. And there's gotta be some off-the-shelf technology that we can deploy on a 12 to 18 to 24-month basis until we get the permanent fix or even the better fix.
If it could be as simple as turning up the watts back up a little bit on the tower that the FCC took away from them. To me, that seemed like a really quick fix. Right. I don't understand the policy of going.
And I know when we say Band-Aid, a lot of times it's, kind of a little derogatory, but these are like on a jugular bleed, if somebody is laying in the road and it's life or death, and it's, the Band-Aid's worth it. I think we all agree on that. But I think we need to get some input on that specific thing from emergency services coordinator. What are the Band-Aids, or what do we need in this current budget to address that?
Mr. Chair, you serve on the 911 commission, right? Do you mind sharing a little bit of an update on where we are on the actual plan from federal study?
It was all, it went to procurement, and it was trying to, they were trying to adopt the, I guess that's the Maryland,
I'm sorry to jump
no, I can't think of where. It's vetted out, and then, the figures just come back that, it was beyond probably all the localities' budget or capability to do, so they sent it back out. And I'll try to, it's not been, they haven't got a vendor.
Okay, they don't have a vendor, but is there, with the study that has been done, are there potential things that could be picked out of that study for Grayson County?
It's possible, that we could, like some of the, tower, that may be something that we could go ahead and do. We have a new technician, radio tech now, so we could put him, kind of task him to seeing, what.
Mr. Chair, they're still looking at the P25 system.
P2, 225.
That price tag, last time we talked about it, before it went back out for RFP, was 3.2, I believe.
And is that bill, like, I'm assuming that bill's due when we make sign the agreement to say, we gotta pony up, right, we're gonna buy the system.
That's what I had heard one time, Mr. Chair. What I had heard one time was that 911 commission would, we'd get a bill from them and the two counties in the city every year that we put into our budget until it's paid for. Is that still being considered? Yes.
So we're not having to pay 3.2 this year if they sign this coming year.
It'd be an annual budget.
Yeah.
We'd pay to them, pay it off.
As backing up just a little bit, the tower at Point Lookout, I know there's some issues that John had mentioned that. What I don't know, and I don't know if Bradley, that we're still fairly young in this thing, but I don't know the agreement that we have with Point Lookout and who all's permitted to be on that tower, what we're using that tower for. I've heard a plethora of things out in the community, so
I was just made, so I made it, Jack.
Yeah.
I just made aware that, when I come back, that, or sometime in the last day or two, that, that question's been asked. I think we're looking into that now. The sheriff, my recollection, has the agreement, so we need to get a copy of that to see exactly what that states, on the agreement.
and there's a separate thing up on that mountain, it's APCO, that's their whole thing, and then the counties is right next to it, if I understand, is that?
Yes.
Panther Creek, is that what you're talking
No, this is Point Lookout, it's that in the homeowners association up there.
So, sorry, let me see.
We're asking for a lot of different information.
Yeah, right, so look, if are you going or you want me to go?
No, you don't.
Okay, if comms is a priority, which it sounds like it continues to be, this is one of our objectives to deal, fixing Point Lookout is one of our goals, that the infrastructure issue is one of our goals that we have to, we'll get all the answers to that, so we provide that to you. It sounds like the other thing I'm kind of hearing now is that you need to understand where your decision space is on some of these goals, and we need to lay these out under the different priorities for you to go, okay, here's the 5 things we need to prioritize for communications. Here's the 4 things we need as far as housing, and 3 things as far as childcare or whatever it is. And then you go, and then we go, okay, here's the money we got, which is what you're talking about. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Here's what we're gonna decide. Here's a menu of things that we have here, and then that'll allow you to make better decisions on what we're gonna spend dollars. Is that what I'm hearing here? Or am I missing something?
Mr. Sheriff, if I may too, I might remind the board that the auditors, you remember when they come and do the audits, I've heard it for 2 or 3 years now, that we have low debt, for a county. We're in good shape, and that's a good thing. But there might become a point in time that if, Mr. Boyer agrees and the board agrees, there might become a point in time that we have to get a loan, a USDA loan or something. They offer very attractive rates. I think I heard that we hear 2 point something today on the USDA loan. There might become a time that we have to do a bond or a loan or whatever to be able to do some of these, because I don't know that we can pay as we go.
Well, but
Some of this stuff.
I think to the county administrator's point, if we lay out kind of the things that are our priorities and we agree, slap the table, and then we go back and look at what our day-to-day operations are gonna cost us with inflation and all that, and then we figure out what our revenues are looking like versus expenses, then we can make a decision on how we're gonna fund stuff or not fund stuff. And I think that's what we're trying to get to, is just kind of help you shape that left and right side of the balance sheet.
Yes.
I guess if I may just follow up with what I think you just said. Well, what you got, the 4th categories you've got here seem to be a good framing for the next year, as far as, but what's the staff's, based on the CIP, based on what staff input is saying, what are the things underneath those 4 groups that the administration thinks we need to fund and the priorities associated with it? What's your all's, not you, because I know you 48 hours out, that's not a fair question, but I think what would help us help you
Understood.
is you tell us kind of, these are what we're thinking based on what we did last year, what we did the year before, what we know that the CIP says, what we think the CIP needs to pull off and move forward, what needs to be delayed. And what's that number? And then we start saying, okay, what's our revenue? And then we can maybe give you better guidance that way, but it might help us by doing a little staff churn.
Got it.
On
Because
what,
I'm sorry.
no, you're right, on what it is what you all are feeling, and then
Because these are like problems in the county that need to be addressed. And like childcare, is it gonna be our number 2 thing for a budget? I don't really understand that. I think it's an issue that we need to be working on, that should be a priority. That's one of those things we don't know what it looks like, because in my mind, that's a private business. And the county just needs to be able to provide.
enablers. I mean, we're
We
looking
need
at
to be
enablers.
so incentive packages or something for a childcare thing part of it. I mean, I don't think the county's gonna open up a government-run daycare.
Right, and then we just tap into some of the DSS grants that are, I guess, is that considered us too, but they've got some seed money, I think, sitting there waiting to put into childcare, but I don't think that, personally, I don't think that childcare would be one of our top priorities.
Budgetary.
Budgetary priorities. It is a concern, a problem, and a priority, but budgetary wise, we can't throw, like the other problem, enough money towards it to solve it, and it is a private thing.
But from a budgetary standpoint, when I look at childcare, it's what can the county do in terms of an incentive to attract a private individual to open up a daycare and do that? And it's really the only thing that we can do, short of building one and staffing it. I think that's a whole.
I guess in your line of thinking, Mitch, you all have done more work on it than I have, but when we do these industrial parks, which I'm not a fan of, but a lot of times they say, well, you need to have a shell built, all right, in order to attract business there. if we're looking at a short term and a budget thing, and we think from a childcare standpoint, this is just throwing it out there, but if, we've talked about Baywood, we've talked about other facilities that we have for each, they're all agencies looking at it. We have a grant to do the study for Baywood. And maybe that's what we're after, is that incentive that we've got this building, wherever that building might be. And that's what we're going to try to get set for this upcoming FY, so that we can then attract the child care facility that we need to service. Is that something like that? Is that, I'm not advocating for a building, I'm just advocating for.
And that's, I don't know what the incentive is.
Yeah.
I mean,
Other than the physical, we have a place if somebody's interested in opening a child care.
well, is there anything on the capital improvement plan that could be put together with there's space? I mean, I know there's been a wellness center on the capital improvement plan for a long, long time.
Since 2013.
Well, I think on the 10-year anniversary of putting the wellness center on the capital improvement plan, we take a look at it. And there could be a room and access out of that somebody might command for healthcare.
There is an initiative right now going on. As a matter of fact, some of us will be going to a meeting tomorrow on, and that is the United Way initiative that we already have ongoing. And in order to keep that going, we have to have a building this year. Lisa, I'll
By
let
September 30th.
you go into any details that they might want to know, but we have to do that in order to keep this. We don't have to. but we're gonna
To keep what?
To keep the grant.
We have received a $100,000 grant, and Mr. Belton, if you'll help me out here, since you're on the top board. It's a $100,000 grant that the county actually received, because we have no way to implement the grant. We partnered with Rooftop, which is the community action program in Galax. They were already doing Head Start, of course, so we kind of sub-granted this $100,000 to them, which allowed them, and I think it's either 10 or 15, I can't remember how many 3 and 4 year olds that provides childcare for. It's a mixed delivery. So it's a preschool and a daycare kind of combined. It's a little bit of a hybrid program.
Is that what you mean by mixed delivery?
Mixed delivery, yes. That program started here in Independence, and the Head Start facility at the foot of the hill from Independence Elementary, it had to move because Head Start needed all of that space. It wasn't planned for. Now they're having to move again. So 3rd year of operation, 3rd location. So that's why it's imperative, unless we just say we can no longer support this program, we'll have to turn that grant money back in, and those children will lose that preschool education.
How many children are we talking about?
10 to 15. I can't remember exactly how much. It's so much money per child, but we have gotten information that is expanding, that there'll be more money available, and this program can expand into even infants and toddlers instead of 3 and 4 year olds, excuse me.
And that specific grant you're referring to, what can we spend that on if we have a facility?
The education of the children.
So it'd be paying the teachers or buying the books or what?
Yes,
or all?
yes, the educational, the piece of that, yes. Yes.
Nothing on facility.
No, it is not a facility space.
Nothing on facility, and the grant that DSS has is facility, but the 100,000 that I've heard from them a few times.
Okay, must be something
It's
different.
something like to get it upgraded to meet code, et cetera.
Okay.
And I'm just winging it here because I'm not part of that, but there is a facility here in town. I don't know how hard it would be to acquire. There used to be an adult home up on Rainbow Circle. It's huge. It's got, I want to say 4 acres. I talked to the lady there yesterday. She said somebody had mentioned that to her. She had just took out her commercial whatever it is that they have to have over top of the stove, and the name of it's like hood. And I said, well, she's like, I done took the hood out, you know. I said, well, that's not a problem. If we figure out something, you know, we'll put a hood back. But I think, you know, her son's a businessman. He's kind of took over most of her stuff and managing, and he's out of town. And I told her to have him contact the county when he comes back in a couple of weeks, because that's a prime area. It's centrally located, and it's right up, you know,
Great
right
information.
up by Darko. I mean, there's several.
Thanks for sharing.
So but you know, whether we can get to where we want to be, I don't know, but that's at least an option we didn't know about. That facility just closed. I used to have clients there, and they've sent them, you know, to other areas. It was an adult home, but it's a really nice brick house, 2-story, almost like 2 full apartments below. And she's just sitting there now wondering, what can I do with this? And she's used to the chaos of having a group home, and she's there by herself. And I think might be a great opportunity if we could figure out how to partner with her or her son. And then again, at the end of the day, they may say they have some other idea that they want to do.
Sure. I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. And if I may, I think we've gotten off on the capital improvements, and we're kind of focusing there. So let's pull it back to what Mr. Avi said. Let's pull it back to our overall goals and objectives of the and let's compare to previous years. You know, 1 year we focused on personnel. Personnel had been neglected for so many years. We took that one particular year and we focused on readjusting salaries, taking a second look at benefits, that sort of thing. So is that, then 1 year we focused on, last year and year before, we focused on recreation, you know, boosting recreation back to where it needed to be, and to give that more life to to those services. Are there other services that you would like to see focused on instead of just day to day, you know, same old year, same, you know, new budget year, same old process? I think that's what I am really wanting to get at. Your guidance into what do you want to see at the end of fiscal year 24? What do you want to see accomplished?
I'd like to look at what our goals and priorities were last year and see where we're at this year on those specific goals and priorities. And do we need to keep moving with that rather than create some new ones?
We didn't have as much formality with those goals and objectives last year, so I'm really wanting to rehash this and get those more solidified into our the budget process.
And I guess, you know, we knew about the personnel problem because you all brought us the personnel problem. So I guess it gets back to, if the staff comes up with a draft of what it is we think we need to focus on, because you all are the day-to-day folks. You're the ones that know where you're hearing. I mean, we hear stuff too, but stuff we hear about may be more falling into the longer range stuff versus what we can solve in the next 12 months. You know, I don't know. You know, we've talked about healthcare. We've talked about incentives for volunteer fire and rescue. I mean, that one, if you want one right now, that
There
to
you
me is that's the top priority is incentives for our volunteer fire and rescue. But I guess help us help you is kind of where I keep coming back to on what it is you think we need to be, and then we can maybe help you steer a little bit more. That may be unfair.
I think one of our priorities, I don't know if everyone agree with me or not, but is to keep our taxes where they are.
Okay? That's exactly what we're asking.
We need to not have a need for a tax increase.
And I hear that. I guess my take is that what are the services we want to do? If the numbers don't work, then we've got a decision to make on taxes, or on services. But that's kind of my, you know, we don't have taxes, just have taxes. We have them in order to provide services. There's services that we're doing or should be doing that's a discussion. If there's services that we're doing we shouldn't be doing, that's also a discussion. So that should be the driver in my opinion.
I just never, in the last year, heard any services that needed to be cut. Volunteer services need to be added. I'm curious to hear what you guys think that we could be more lean with as far as services.
What staff thinks we could leave,
Well, be more lean with,
Trim?
yeah.
okay,
My take is, if we looked at what we give, it's just like the road, the land care. We give to them for a long time. Can we still do that? Can we still do everything that we've always done and still have money left over that we can look at something new? But to get at least what we've been supporting all these years, and I think it's been good because you put in 5,000 and they put in 15, that's a win-win. Because they're taking our 5,000 to help grow in land care, which is there's some good things here. And I'm all for the, helping these kids learn how to do something besides stay on the telephone. But that's what I would look at if I was in your position, is to see if we can still fund what we're funding. And if we can, and then add something if we need to, we know where was at. That's just basics, I'm thinking. But we can get in. We know this communication is coming up, and it's going to be a big deal, and we got a plan for it. And like I did say, we may have to take out a loan and pay for it a little at a time, because you can't throw $2 million on to start with. But I guess that's my priority, is see if we can fund what we've been funding. It's been voted on, or we've done it for years. I don't think there's anything there. We just need to say, let's forget about them and do something else. I mean, that's the priority, right? To fund what we've been funding.
We are going to experience a new revenue or two in this budget too.
Yeah, I guess my take on that though is that if we can look at if you assume we weren't going to get $700K, for example, from the casino, what does that look like based on our current projections, right? Based on what we know we control, which is real estate taxes, personal property taxes, all that. So you base the budget on the stuff we know we can control. The stuff that comes in that we can't control, because it could go up, it could potentially go down, but then we can make decisions using the additional funding. I kind of look at the casino money kind of like the ARPA money, although we know the casino thing's probably going to be, every year for probably a long time. But that gives us that strategic flexibility to be able to do things from a year-to-year basis that with funds that we don't control, but we're being given. It's almost like a grant. We just happen to be getting it every year. And so that's kind of my take on how to approach it.
okay. I like that. I share that outlook because I have yet to see a single thing on paper that we're getting that lottery money. I know that I have full faith that we will, but when you're talking about finances, you've got to see it in black and white before you can bank on it.
They
And
are
right now, we
already
can't
banking
bank on
money for us.
Huh?
They're already banking money. There's a group that's making the administrators and different ones in the area that affected our meeting.
I got it, but at this point in our cycle, we don't have a time when that might show up. I would rather plan for not having it and then have a special called meeting in order to say, what do we want to do now that we got $700 or $1 million?
Icing on the cake.
Yeah, and then I'd rather have that problem than to plan for it, and then they come back and say, well, we're going to have to delay for a year or whatever. So I would rather plan with what we can control from a revenue side and let that then drive what it is we do on the.
And there are certain criteria, I think it has to be spent on public safety education, pretty broad.
Yeah, there's 3 categories, I think.
Public safety education,
I think that's a goal.
transportation.
For lack of
There's a goal.
a better word, our dividend check or whatever we get from those.
That's right, that's what it is.
Do they have any kind of scheduling system set up? I mean, when it was established, was there a distribution time for the dividend check
I think there is.
on quarterly or something like that? Or-
We have to, we can find out. Of course, we can find that out.
When we talk about priorities that we have control over and we don't have, I think some that's coming up, and I know this board will be asked about this, the security of this building. And it'll come out of the judge and the upstairs. But this is very unsecure building. And I know we've had, I'm on the DSS board, but we had some threats just a couple of weeks ago. They're gonna come in here and shoot everybody. The sheriff knows about it, but there's so much he can do. And people come in this building before 8 o'clock in the morning, you never know who's in here. And it's getting to be worse and worse. But security has been a topic here in the last month, big time. And when it comes down from the judge, he says, we gotta do this, right? I mean, we don't have no choice. And that's something else gonna be thrown in our lap.
I see that as another goal. So
Yes.
we're accomplishing what we're setting out to do. So even though it's just conversations, I'm picking out the goals that I hear coming from you guys. So
Okay.
keep them coming.
I know the security's gonna have to be a goal whether we like it or not.
So we've got, I would like to see a list of the new revenues that we're getting, whether it's casino. Of course, we've got the ARPA that's, we've got that kind of on the table. We got the opioid money, which is freed us up with a few things and helped us enhance a few things. The tribal money that has that check come in yet? The one that we discussed, do you anticipate that in this budget cycle?
I do anticipate that in this budget cycle, and when that comes in, we can have one of those, meetings like Mr. Vance mentioned about, hey, what do we do with this money? It's $222,000.
Because I know we beat this around a lot last year. The personal property tax on the vehicles was, way more than what we were anticipating. We gave that back to the folks, a percentage of that. Do we know, does that look to be the same this year? Are they gonna be? Have you heard anything on that?
I have not heard that, and that is something that we'll work out, as soon as Mr. Bola has the actual publications on what those values will be.
Publications, yeah.
They're set in January. Whether or not he's received those publications, I haven't had that conversation.
So in light of a lot of these things, I mean, it seems like we're being blessed with a lot of different avenues of revenue. I'd like to see us look at doing away with the $25 car fee. And we beat that around a little bit last year. I thought we were almost there with that, but we didn't make it to the finish line.
You just named all the revenues of.
Oh, did I go through them all? I was trying to run.
You said you'd like a list of them.
Well, I've got my list.
You named everyone I know of.
Okay, I don't think we have the actual numbers, is what I can.
Figures,
Yeah, we don't have the figures yet, so
No.
we can list potential.
And we may not know the figures. You guys will. Exactly.
And this is a goal, but again, it may not necessarily have dollars attached to it right now, but, discussion with the school system about, not just a discussion, but I mean, an actual working group on the future educational needs of the county. Because that's such a key component to the future of the county and the economic development opportunities that exist and our strategic problem of population retention and recruitment. Starting that we've tried several times in the past years of doing a study and doing all these other things, but we're talking about goals and objectives, therefore they don't necessarily have dollars or an action against it. That effort, though, I think we can't continue to kick down the road because infrastructure alone is old, but the future education of the county and the ability to keep kids here, employ them, have people move here with kids, that's all part of that. So I think it's an important goal that we set, even though it may not necessarily be a budget goal with a dollar sign against it. There very well may be something that comes out of it.
Can I speak? Yeah, so I agree. I think that helps me think through how we want to frame this a little bit. We certainly can lay out, I mean, as we all know, we can have requirements each year. They may not be funded. They may not get funded each year. It may just depend on the priority of how we look at this. I am hearing that we need to do a little more staff work. For us, I think for us, this was just a more of a discussion period, but we will put the staff work in to help you think through some of these issues that we're facing here. And what I've heard is some short-term, what can we do with what we have from a menu standpoint? And how can we make sure we don't, or there are options to remove things or add things, I think is what I'm hearing as well. And so I think it's going to take us maybe a little bit of time to get educated on some of these things and make sure we give you all the information you need to help you kind of decide or think those things. We'll as you said, help us help you. We'll give you that as well. So
can I follow along a little bit with what
Yeah.
John said as far as like the education, and we beat this around the other day a little bit with some talk about vocational training. For example, I don't know that there's ever been a request from down at we used to call it the vocational school, the Cake Center, I get those mixed up. The welding bays down there, I think are the same ones that were there when we were there back in the 80s. I'm not sure, but if we could help out following some of the objectives like he had mentioned with education and retention, because welding is a big deal. We've got RPM right here that's hiring people and seems to be a very productive company that's come in, and I guess they're expanding. I don't know a whole lot. Probably need to get down there and ask some questions, but if we could help the vocational school in some type of way, tie them into what we've already got, there might be something. There may be something we could do aside from our normal everyday school budget. I don't know how that thing.
I got it. Yeah, I think the educational piece, I think we all agree on how important that is for our county.
For this year's budget cycle, I think John covered it, but incentives for our volunteers. Well, if we can forgive personal property tax or break on real estate taxes or cover insurance or whatever, Paul's working on it, I believe, to seal an incentive package of it. But also a part of that recruitment and retention of the volunteers. And there's marketing dollars out there. Virginia Emergency Management Services, Steve, you were there with us. But that is going to take a commitment from the county. Even if you get the grant, you got to commit to a certain number of years. If the money runs out, you got to keep doing it. So I don't think it's going to be a huge part of our budget, but I would like to see us do something for the volunteers.
I know they used to get the waiver on the county stickers. Do they still get that on the vehicle fee?
The way that was written, it was written because of the decal. It was And when the decals went away and it became a vehicle fee, we need to rewrite the ordinance. So that is on task to be done.
When do you think he'll have that? Is that part of his, when he comes to talk about emergency services needs, is that part of his budget presentation?
No, he and I are partnering on that. I can have him present it if you'd like to hear that at that time.
No,
That can be done
from a
at the
timing
board meeting.
standpoint, I'm just curious where he's at. I know you all been working on it, but from a timing standpoint, when did he think he was gonna have that ready? Any sense?
No, I don't have a sense of that, but I'll see if I can get a timeline on that.
Well, it's gotta be within the next 4 months since we're in the budget cycle.
Exactly. And that may, I actually thought of that just coming as, not part of the budget cycle. I didn't think about that as part of the budget cycle because it's really relatively so small. It's rewriting the ordinance.
Well, that specific one, the topic is about incentives.
Oh, sure.
And
Yes,
so-
the incentives absolutely are.
Yeah. So
Yes.
that's really the issue, whether it's that vehicle fee or
Yes.
other stuff. That's what I think we're interested in.
Absolutely.
They are still getting it, right?
Not to my knowledge. It's not coming through my office.
Okay, we just need to check on that.
But a part of that, Braylon and I met with a guy that works at University of Virginia, he's a marketing guy. And they're gonna meet with Paul to talk about this marketing campaign thing to help retain and recruit volunteers. I'll loop you in on that connection based on the introduction we did yesterday. But if they're gonna do it pro bono, and so once they develop it, if it works, there's potential for expanding in other areas, but that, if we end up liking what they do and we use it and we start doing it and we get the grant dollars that Brantley was talking about from emergency services, that's gotta be sustained, I think is what the point was, so. But there's some real potential with this group that wants to work with us on that.
And being able to launch that recruitment and retention effort, it would be really ideal in my mind to be able to say these are the incentives that the county is willing to support our local agencies with at the same time. And maybe the incentives come first so we know we have them.
I don't want to steal his thunder. I could give you a little hint. But
No, but that's what we talked to this guy about is Paul's working on these incentives, and that's gotta be kind of part of your effort while you need to talk to Paul in order to make sure he understands. You understand what he's trying to do and what the Emergency Services Commission is trying to do in order to sustain the system as well.
Well, on the housing issue, are we talking about there's no inventory to buy out there? Are we talking about government housing?
Well, from the senior advocacy side, there's a shortage of senior care. The facility that Tracy was talking about a few minutes ago, Mike Burnwell stayed there a couple of days ago. She did a wonderful job. It was a great place. But short of that, we've got an issue related to senior housing, whether it's multi-level care, it's group homes, it's whatever. And so I think it's back to the similar approach on the child care. It's how do we set the enablers to get people to come in there and help us solve this problem?
There's a brand new facility over in Sparta,
Yeah.
and it is just a fantastic facility. And you would think, given you told me that stat the other day, over 60% of our
Citizens of
65 or 65 and older. That, you would think we'd have more people jumping up and down, saying there isn't any place for us to go when we get that. Not that I'm learning how all this works. Not that the county can provide that, but they provide the incentive to be able to put them up. I wonder if it wouldn't be worth talking to that company that built that in Sparta. So,
I got that right.
oh, you already,
I won't get that right. I'll take that right.
Chestnut, the landing, the Chestnut Creek.
having a discussion on the housing issue, because I'm not sure. I don't have a solution, but I do know some of the issue, I guess. While I was in Richmond, I heard from everybody pretty much, and Richmond, I've heard some of these conversations too, but what we're seeing a lot with the housing issue is Airbnbs are basically taking over. And folks are using those for vacation rentals, and it's taking a house off the market that somebody moving here may want to purchase, or even somebody may want to rent, long-term instead of for rental. And I'm not knocking the Airbnbs, because trust me, I think those are good things too, and if I had one, I'd be doing the same thing. But it's taking houses off the market, and then there's companies outside of Virginia that's buying a lot of these, fixing them up, and they never step foot in Virginia. They're corporate businesses. It maybe not happening in our area yet, I don't know, but it is happening in other areas. So it's also driving the real estate taxes up, because they're paying way above the market value for these houses, and the locals is, bearing that burden. I don't have an answer, but I've been listening to a lot of discussion and a couple of trips up there. And you hammered that all last year about how we need to be up there and hearing things, and I thought of you quite a bit while I was up there. It's
While
like,
you were listening.
I could hear Brantley's voice, but yeah, and I know you guys probably experienced some of the same stuff, but I know we've got this tourism incentive program, and we're providing, and I'm not sure exactly how that works. That may be a discussion for another day, but we're incentivizing ourselves out of some housing, I think. And that I'm not real familiar with how the tourism incentive program works. I've seen it on the website. I know that, if you're doing that, get a big break unless you live in the town of Independence or Freeze. And you guys were on previous board past that. You probably know better how that works, but that might be something we want to take another look at. And is that helping us or hurting us as far as the housing issue goes?
I did get an email today where the Grayson County Public Schools is receiving almost $500,000 from the Department of Education. It will come into be deposited to them March of 2023.
Is this something they anticipated, or is this?
No, it looked like they found out and they're gonna need to do a budget adjustment or whatever. So Lisa and Michelle.
Is it gonna affect this year's budget?
Or Lisa, I think they're talking through that now, Lisa and Michelle.
Right, when I asked about that, they didn't anticipate spending much, if any, of those funds this fiscal year. Would ask for them to be rolled over until next fiscal year. I did, for just in case they do have to spend a dime, I did ask that they might ask for a budget adjustment for fiscal year 23, and then have that rolled over if they don't use it. I think that would be safer.
That's $500,000 additional that they weren't counting on, but now they're getting. Is that the way I understand it?
That's the way I understood it.
So if we could talk just a second about the last couple of years that John and I have been working with a couple of school board members. Historically, up until 2015, is that right? Is that date right?
Yeah.
Is it
2015.
the above RLE from the county to the school was $340,000, and that went back for a long, long time unless there was something. So one thing that the four of us tried to work on is let's get back to something more reasonable like it was prior to 2015, and I think we've accomplished that. But then, and thank goodness Mr. Wilmore said transparency, but the county, at least last year, and I hope the board will agree to it again, that even though they asked for $375, I think, this year, to continue to put that $780,000 above that into a capital improvement plan for the school, so that money is sitting there. And so when this comes up and they're going to get $500,000, what I would want to ask is, why don't you take $375,000 out of that and let us put $1,000,001 in that capital improvement plan this year. Does that make any sense? I mean, if they're getting $500,000 extra dollars, they don't need 350 from the county, but the county, by a show of good faith, still continues to forward that money into the rainy day, not rainy day fund, but capital improvement plan fund. If they don't want to do that, I mean, I don't think it should be a sticking point, but
I think first we need to know if there's any stipulations on that money that they're required to do X, Y, and Z with. And why did they get that? Was it the ADM? They got maybe more students they had now than they had before,
This,
at the beginning of the year?
this particular money did not have to do with ADM.
Okay.
I do know that it's too soon for that.
This is not a grant.
Yeah.
It's a grant? Oh, okay. Well, it may be specific to something, but.
well, yeah, if it was free money, just, take 375 out of it and let the county be a steward of that. And then instead of funding 375 and 785, put the whole bunch of it in that capital improvement plan. So, I mean, then they're gonna have over $3 million by the time the ESSER money runs out if we keep looking at it like that. Which that's a bunch of money sitting around. They can fix a bunch of stuff.
Well, I know the addition to elementary schools will be huge.
The what?
The addition to the elementary school that they mentioned,
Yeah.
that's probably gonna be a big thing coming pretty soon.
Yeah, $3 million will go there.
So we primarily will spend it next year on the staff wages and benefits.
Say again now?
Staff wages.
We will primarily spend it next year on the staff wages and benefits.
The 500K?
That's from the school, our school.
That's fine, but I don't think that the rationale behind that, as Brantley described it, I think it makes a lot of sense. Because they get a lot of, and we do too, we get, grants that come in all the time, but that to me is a pretty prudent way to set the conditions for the future. So that as we have this discussion, whether it turns out to be the addition to the elementary school, or they decide to do something different up at Highland and make use of that facility, or, whatever. He was talking about all the stuff he wants to do with the freeze gym. I mean, he's got the money to do all that. I think if they've got this additional flow coming in, it makes sense to offset it.
Just a thought. The Highlands, Highlands has a lot of extra space up there. I don't know if the childcare piece could be looked at in partial with that. I don't know if it's doable or what the regulations are, that kind of thing, but as far as Highland School, maybe, the county or the school system can dedicate a part of that empty wing to.
I think there may be a child care element at Highlands, because there was last year, maybe it's Head Start program, I don't know what it was, but a kid got outside the chain link fence and was walking towards the road.
I think that is the Virginia Preschool Initiative that is
Okay.
done through the school system.
Okay.
I may be completely wrong with
I
that.
just know a little kid that wasn't old enough for kindergarten was headed to the road.
I do think that's the Virginia Preschool Initiative that is housed there at Highlands.
And there, that may not be an option, but it may be.
That was,
No, I think it is an option. There was an article yesterday about what they're doing in Covington, where they're doing that very same thing, where they've got childcare occurring at one of the schools. And it's a similar issue that you were talking about with rooftop, where they're having to potentially move out and go to a different facility because the school now wants to do something in that same space, but the precedence of childcare at an educational facility is there. They're doing it in Covington right now.
And in the past, it may have been that the principals didn't want that on their campus.
Yeah, right.
They got ultimate, principal can remove the superintendent from the ballgame. That's how much power the principal has. I've seen it done. It's quite a show.
Rooftop has specs on where the need is, and the need is here, not over
no, that was all,
Population would support it, boys.
that was offered at one time, during this mixed delivery, and they said it was just too far away from where the need.
there.
Well-
The need shows to be in this area.
And so they,
They're not gonna take a kid to Islands and then come all the way back to Florida or Galaxy.
Well, there's still a need.
That's not what I'm thinking. That wouldn't, because they're not gonna bring their kid from Highlands to daycare down here and go back to work in Marion. So they have a need. It may not be as many as they do have here. And if, as a county, if we're gonna address the need, I think we need to attempt to address the need of the whole county, not just here. But this is the most central, most people we can serve this year.
okay,
There's a-
I'm sorry, I thought you
there's a
were talking
lady-
about the mixed delivery program that we're trying to find out.
Right, no, I was just talking about the overall.
There's still a
issue.
need. That would be in addition to, I think is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
There, to think somebody I've got a lady who works for me, who works with me, who almost had to quit her job because she couldn't find childcare help. She's on Big Ridge Road. She drives to Ennis, North Carolina, and then comes back to Independence to go to work. That's
She's
how,
a special person though, to do that,
because she wants to work.
because she wants to work.
well, and she wants to have good care for her kid too.
That's exactly right. Yeah, the child care is a much bigger problem than the five of us understand.
Right.
Well, I've experienced it. And we used to pay a little old lady right up here on the road up here near the park, and she kept 4 or 5 kids, and she'd give my daughter a Mountain Dew every day, and I'd go get her, and she'd pass on. Yeah,
It's a real,
But she
it's a
did
real need.
yeah. But I think it's not just, and I know there's the biggest bulk of the need, like Ken said, it's at that area, and that's probably where United Way is focused. But we know that there's people in Elk Creek that have similar issues, maybe not as many, and on the west end as well, and even over in Freeze. And I don't know if partnering with the schools is even an option, but it might help them accomplish a goal in us. For example, if they're wanting to expand the elementary school, and we say, hey, we're gonna get behind you a little bit more than what we thought we were, because y'all can have a little addition down there for some childcare. I don't know, it's just a thought.
And it makes a lot of sense, because there's already a cafeteria there, and there's, that legs, first I've ever heard of it was this afternoon. That makes a ton of sense.
And the thing we're always gonna run into is gonna be the regulations and the rules of the school system, and the state regulation says you can't have a little kid with a big kid or something. I'm just throwing those, I don't know, but those are potential barriers that we might not be able to overcome, but they may not be there now, I don't know. Just a thought, we're just throwing all the sausage out, man.
Mr. Chair, I'm gonna let that leave. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I wasn't talking to you, Zeke.
Well, you looked at it.
I did it. See y'all.
Thank you.
Right. Anything else?
You wanna review what you got and see?
I do, you're reading my mind, absolutely. I want to kind of review the goals that I've picked up on. We will take those back and bring them back to you in a very polished manner. I have gotten, of course, communication, but that's an umbrella. Communications is an umbrella. We have broadband, cellular, emergency communications, with paging included in that. But as a short term from that, I wrote down, let's see if we can't work ahead of the federal plan. And that federal is the federal communications. Let's see if we can't work ahead and maybe pre-build some sites as a Band-Aid for the West Wing.
Well, part of that, I guess, yes, on the Band-Aid, but understanding the needs, the infrastructure needs of this future system, there may be some things that we can do to set the conditions so that when we get this system, we're ready to hang it on something. We're ready to employ it, or I should say deploy it. And so that's part of it. And that may end up being Point Lookout Tower, it may not be, but anyway, that's. Okay.
Right, which, and I also wrote down infrastructure in the West Virginia, so that covers that.
While we're talking on the communication, I kind of drifted out from some conversation there a minute ago because I was trying to look back through some emails. And what that Frederick County, Virginia, proposal was what they were sending out to the two counties and to the city manager. And that was back in January, that kind of tell you where it was, back in the 27th, the one that we were sending that, and then
I think $5 million, if I
yeah.
remember.
So that proposal, that's why that kind of bellied up, was the cost on that. And so they went back, and so that's where we're kind of in limbo right now with the P25 system. So that's.
And I think that system's in the CIP plan as from that standpoint, but
It is, it just doesn't have a dollar amount.
that's right, okay.
But again, I don't know that it'll be a capital project. It's probably gonna be a budget line item every year for the next.
It's like,
Yeah,
it's like about $200,000 a year or something like, is what the proposal was, and
The two
that.
counties in Grayson County, and we allocated according to population based, just like 911 is.
Another, base our budget on what is controlled, and then what do we do with the extra dollars? That's just my shorthand on that. The security of the building. Looking at doing away with the $25 fee for vehicles. Establishing a discussion and work group at the county, or with county and school personnel to determine the future education. And then adding in supporting the K Center independently from the school system. Recruitment and retention of volunteers. And those are the main that I wrote actual goal out the side of. So that gives us plenty of places to start. Our next meeting, we'll have this fleshed out, or even before our next meeting.
Well, on the case center was more specific, I guess, for economic and workforce development goals or initiative that we, I'm not sure, that was my thoughts on it.
It's very important that in a situation, situation is the right word. It means a lot to me personally to hear what you guys have to say, because then we can take ideas from staff. We want to make sure that we're aligned, we're all on the same page. So this has been very, very informative, very beneficial to me as a finance person, to make sure that we're all level, we're not, we're coming together to pull the same rope. We're not in the tug of war, but we're pulling together. So I think this has been very beneficial. I appreciate all of your time.
I guess our next meeting will be the regular monthly meeting on the 9th. Second Thursday, and then what's our next workshop? You know what it is?
I think it's the 28th. I think it's the 28th.
20.
It's all I have on the calendar.
Are the packets for next Thursday ready yet?
3 o'clock.
The packets for next Thursday, are they ready yet? No, sorry. Okay.
All right.
That look.
This is just a discussion thing. We talked about the $25 personal property, not sticker or whatever. But people ask all the time, what am I getting for my taxes? And police department, schools, the road fixing, the garbage pickup, everything that goes on. And Lisa, what's the biggest money that comes into the county is for? It's from real estate. To be fair to everybody, the burden is on people that own real estate. Now, if they don't own real estate and they rent or they pay car taxes. So in essence, they're help paying for sheriff's department, rescue squads, schools. If you take everything away from personal property, then the real estate people's the only ones paying the bill. So to be fair, you've got to spread it out.
Can Mr. Chair? Sure. I see what you're saying. But those same people that pay the real estate taxes pay the personal property taxes. And last year we lowered the levy, and the large landowners probably seen the lowest tax rate. They probably got a cut if. Well, if you had a house and a lot or a couple acres, you probably didn't see that. But if you had a large amount of land, and I talked to someone that had several hundred acres, they said their tax bill was $5,000 less last year. So we did that last year. We addressed that indirectly by lowering that levy. And just to back up, we had a reassessment on the houses and lots that went up. The regular land stayed, large land masses, farms, whatever, unless it was on the river, stayed the same. So when we lowered the levy from, what, 5 cents?
59 to 54.
So we lowered that 5 cents. So the large landowners seen a huge tax break last year. And I understand, and I want to be fair as we can as well when we're not just providing services, but when we're, collecting taxes. But if, I'm sure a lot of the landowners would probably like to see that $25 removed as well. Because they would benefit from that.
I would, as far as that goes, but to be fair, why should real estate owners pay for everything? I mean.
Well, I don't think real estate owners are. I don't think that's accurate. I think we're still getting personal property. We're paying tax when we go to the store. I mean, there's a lot of taxes that we pay aside from real estate. But real estate is the huge one. But I think folks are paying the fair share. But the folks that may be the greatest impacted are those folks that you're talking about that don't own large pieces of land. It may be the lower income folks, but I think we need to help them too. And because they rent instead of own large land, I don't think we exclude them just directly and say, well, they're not paying their fair share. We could have that discussion all day on the fair share when we look at our county and what's going on in Elk Creek as far as fair share. But if we've got a corporate farmer that comes in here and uses our land and our resources and then what we don't tax them extra or
We get the real estate taxes off of it regardless of who's using
Right.
the land, so.
So if we lower that tax rate, we're losing that as well. But yeah, I'm just, the whole fairness thing, I guess, is just a trigger, but I think it's, anyway, that's a conversation I guess we can have for another time and then we'll get off in the weeds. But.
Well, any sort of tax that can be simplified or whatever makes a lot of sense. In the case of the vehicle tax, I understand it. But it's equated to, I think the figure's somewhere around $300,000 that we get off of the vehicle tax. I may be off on that a little bit, but regardless, that's a revenue. Mm-hmm. And that revenue provides funding to do something or many things, the services, back to the services versus the tax, the revenue discussion. And so, last year, I agree, no one's met a service that they wanted to get rid of, right? I mean, I get it. It's hard to eliminate a service. We tried last year. We tried to eliminate the Wednesday, Saturday trash thing, and that, didn't go and didn't fly. But it's hard, but that's, we've got to have that discussion. If we're going to reduce revenue, then there's got to either be an offset revenue source to cover it, or we got to reduce services. I mean, as simple as that. And I don't think we want to think of services in terms of people per se, because if we get into the game of cutting people but not reducing the actual service that they provide, then we're just providing a less quality of the service, and that's not good either. So it's a hard nut, to balance the revenue and the expenses piece. And so I'm okay with looking at all sources of revenue. As long, if we're gonna reduce it, we need to have the other discussion.
I know we haven't got the check yet, but let's just use this as an example, the tribal money that we're getting, I guess it's a one-time deal, I don't know, but $220,000, so when we have our meeting, we're gonna probably discuss how can we spend that 220. Why can't we talk about, well, what can we cut? Let's cut the $25 fee and put that 220,000
That's an offset.
toward that, right?
That-
That's
a fair discussion
just
to have.
the thinking I was
Yeah, that's a
trying
fair
to
discussion.
project.
So instead of just doing away with it, replacing it with something else.
No,
It's a
I
one-time
would like to
thing,
do away with it, but if that's a 300,000 that we're pinned up against the wall with for this year, we've got the 220,000 right there, then we could potentially, apply toward that. It's just around 300 some thousand for the fees, used to be the county sticker, now it's just a fee with no sticker.
It's a tribal thing, is that a one-time deal?
One time.
Yeah, it's out of,
So then-
kind of out of ARPA.
One time, it was unanticipated,
Right.
completely unanticipated.
And that's the danger, is we don't wanna offset a current revenue source with something we only gonna get one time.
But it might force us next year to be a little more frugal and look at another revenue source.
And then another way, we could take that 220,000, which might be our portion of what we'd have to pay on the radio system, and forego raising taxes with that money, because we've got a 220,000 we can put on our radio system.
Right, or we could not give the airport 70,000 and some of these other places, and there's another 100,000, we're close to 200,000 probably we can look at. So there's a lot of ways we can chop it up. Anyway,
Let's not forget inflation has gone
Yeah.
increased things.
We don't have a balanced budget yet.
Cost of doing business has gone up tremendously.
You guys got anything else for us?
Thank you again.
Thank you, appreciate your time.
Good to have you on board.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, Chair, you entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair also aye.
So.
These were good for Saturday, Friday, I guess they did.
Yeah, 11 o'clock.
Okay,